Welcome to another edition of Client Success Stories. I'm Coach Jackson, and I got my man Sean here now. Sean's here because he wants to share his story on how he absolutely destroyed the 16-week program. This guy lost 18 pounds, 9.1% body fat, 4 inches off his waist, and added 108 points to his strength score. He's absolutely peeled to the gills. He looks like he should be on the cover of Men's Health or in the next action movie. Sean, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, so I'm Sean. So I started with this program now 17 weeks ago. Originally, I've had the Tonal for about 2+ years now. I did it because through my 20s and 30s, I've always been in school and working as a physician. And so I had never really learned how to actually work out. So I thought Tonal would help me learn those kind of skills. And I kind of, over the 2 years, gained a lot of confidence and knowledge of how to work out. But I felt like I was hitting a plateau. I was basically jumping from each new program that came out. I'd finish it, go to the next one. And I was seeing results, but it just kind of wasn't enough for me anymore. And I have obviously always liked your workouts the most. And so that's why I went onto your Instagram and found you and started working with you.
Okay, so very common scenario here, which is you taking your health and your fitness more seriously. You get a tonal, which is awesome, fantastic machine, makes it so easy to be able to work out, and you think you probably got all the answers. But the struggle is that when you're just doing random workouts or jumping from one program to the next, you're not getting that progressive programming, and you're also not tying nutrition into it at all. So that's when you decided to kind of get more serious. Now, you mentioned that you got some results, but it wasn't enough. What did you mean by that? Like, what did you mean by it wasn't enough? Like, why did you want more?
So I really wanted not necessarily definition, but I started taking my health more seriously. I turned 40 this year, and as I kept reading about as you age, having more muscle mass to help you with longevity, that's what I was going for. So it really wasn't less necessarily the look, but more the strength and having the muscle mass to continue my life in a good way throughout the next couple decades.
Got it. So you kind of hit a bit of a plateau with the things that you had, and you're taking your health more seriously, longevity as a priority, wanting to add on muscle mass. And as we know, if you read the amazing book Outlive from Peter Attia, he talks about this in great detail and a far better way than I certainly can here on this podcast right now. But he talks about how muscle mass is so critical, and every pound, even every ounce that you can gain earlier in your life is very critical for later in life and longevity and being able to prevent injuries and just be able to function as a high performing individual later in life. And that was something that was a concern for you. And obviously, then you decided to join. Now, kind of sticking with, before we get to the transformation and such, sticking with this kind of theme of like where you're at, but maybe spinning the wheels in the struggle. Was there a specific moment that like was a trigger moment for you that was like, I got to take this to the next level, or I got to get some help with this? Like, how did you go from using the tonal and just like kind of doing what you were doing to this reaching out and having a conversation about potentially taking this more seriously and getting coaching?
Yeah, so probably the last 6 months before I reached out, I just saw partly my weight was just kind of starting to increase again as I was counting just protein and general calories. I was not doing actual macro counting. So I knew my nutrition needed work, but also just my day to day, it was just kind of getting, I don't want to say boring on the tonal, but as I did each new program, I just didn't feel like it was benefiting as much for it. Obviously, I was feeling sore, but I wasn't getting any kind of definition with it. So I just figured there was something I was missing that I was not gaining from just doing those programs.
You know, it's kind of interesting, being obviously an ambitious guy, just like yourself. It's funny because to the outside world, you know, you had a lot of success and you were in a good spot. You know, you weren't overweight or obese by any means. You just weren't maybe as good as you could be, and you just weren't maximizing your potential. And it's funny how with certain individuals like myself, I'm guessing with you as well, you want to be hitting those higher points. You want to be kind of, as Harvey Specter once said, living life up here. And you were here and you wanted to be up here and it just wasn't good enough. Is that a theme throughout your kind of life? Are you just somebody who wants to take it to that next level? Are you just really ambitious? Like, do you consider yourself a high performer? How do you kind of think about that in context for kind of like this transformation?
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, all throughout my life so far, it's always been education, working hard from like an academic perspective, and then also just emotionally and mentally in that way too. And it was just like that physical part was kind of lagging behind, just because I thought I didn't have time originally to do it. So kind of the structured workouts, and I think this is what also helped me throughout the program is I'm a very checklist oriented person. So you tell me to do something, I'm going to do it. So it was very easy for me to do the workouts in the process, and then showing the results and gaining that kind of confidence week by week was also very helpful.
Incredible. What's funny about that is that the founder of Tonal, his name is Ali. His transformation journey was kind of somewhat similar, where he was building companies, he was working hard, he was a very ambitious person, and he was kind of sacrificing his health. Now, to a degree, I'm guessing that was greater than what you were doing, but it felt like he was sacrificing his health and putting that on the sidelines because he didn't have time and it wasn't a priority, and he was going to get to it later until he finally had this realization of like, oh my gosh, I really need to focus on this now. It's becoming an issue. And then that's when he decided to get healthy, get fit. He spent like a year, and that was where he got the inspiration for Tonal, which is obviously now a reality, which is incredible. But he had that wake up call, and then he took action, and really kind of similar to what you're saying. And I think it's really interesting because there's a lot of ambitious men out there like myself, like yourself, who they kind of want it all to a degree. And I see this a lot with my clients, which is I got all the stuff. I'm checking the boxes with my career, my family, my finances and stuff, but I want to have the physique, I want to have the body, I want to have the health and the fitness that's on par and at the same caliber as the other things in my life. So I love it. I'm really here for that, and I think it's a real notable thing that you acknowledge that was a gap, and that you sought coaching, and that you did kind of put your ego on the side and humbled yourself a bit to say, hey, I maybe don't know as much about this as I thought I did, or maybe could learn. So I'm going to seek some help and get some help with this. Was there any hesitation before you kind of jumped into coaching? Were you nervous? Were you scared? I mean, were there any kind of like things that were kind of just maybe bugging you or bothering you that you were nervous about?
Not necessarily nervous. I was sort of nervous that I wasn't get the results. Like in my head, and I've told people this, that I feel like a lot of times you see these things on Instagram or any kind of social media, and I always had the opinion that it was someone who was like a former college athlete who let themselves go and then was able to get back into shape, not someone who like never learned how to do this stuff, that was able to get in that kind of shape that quickly. So I think that was kind of my hesitation in the beginning was, investing in this, was I going to get some kind of result that I'd be happy with, or was it going to be feel like I wasted my money? Which obviously I don't feel that way at all. It was a great investment, and I think in the conversation with you when we first were talking about it is, you kept using the word investment, which truly made me realize that you take it seriously, and I'm going to take it seriously, and it's not just some kind of gimmick that's online.
Yeah, I totally understand the hesitation there initially, because you're right. There are these kinds of stories. It reminds me of the 4 Hour Body with Tim Ferriss, where he cites this study of this former bodybuilder who gains like 30 pounds of muscle in this very short week period, but the guy had been a former bodybuilder who lost a bunch of weight and then was paid money for every pound of muscle that he gained, and of course doesn't mention it in the book, but was also on steroids and a number of other things. And you're right, there is this kind of thing out there where people will do these crazy transformations. And even with our clients, I will say some of the best and most insane transformations have been people who were former either college or former athletes who were in really great shape and just then crushed it. One of our clients comes to mind. His name was Kelvin, played college football. He did an interview with us. Incredible, amazing guy. He lost 41 pounds, 13% body fat, and put on 6 pounds of muscle in just 16 weeks. Crazy transformation. But he kind of had the genes, he had the genetics, and he had sort of the foundation because he was that former athlete. But we also obviously work with individuals like yourself who don't have that background, and maybe it doesn't come as naturally to you. And what's interesting is that I did play college sports, but it's kind of funny because I looking back now, I never really consider myself like a natural athlete in that regard. Probably because I sat the bench for most of my college career. I had a guy, for all purposes, the guy that was in front of me was an All American, and he got drafted. So like he was pretty good, but I pretty much sat the bench behind him for most of my tenure. So for that, maybe those reasons, I don't really consider myself that natural athlete. But for whatever reason, I took to the gym and fitness, and it was something that helped me rebuild my confidence, and it helped me find myself, and it helped me gain a sense of significance and all these things that I felt like I was missing. For you, as you've gone on this journey, what are maybe some of the things that you've found along the way? Again, for me, it was confidence, it was a bit of significance, and it was, I think, maybe a self assurance that I was lacking of like, wow, I can do things when I put my mind to it, and hard work does pay off if you really apply yourself. What were maybe some lessons you learned along the way, if there were some?
Yeah, so I think when I first started, I was using a tonal almost every day and doing cardio on top of it. And I really didn't understand how, just doing 4 days a week of the program plus a little bit of cardio on the side was going to get me anywhere. And I think within the first month is when I realized, wow, I don't need to be doing all of that hard work on every day and not letting my body recover to where I was. And I think one of the first signs within the first month is just my energy went up. I was sleeping better. I was feeling better, which I think was a big sign to me that it was working. And then also from like a nutritional perspective, um, the first month when I never really thought I was like addicted to sugar or anything, but cutting that out and then I remember the first day after or the first day of phase two, I ate a banana and I was like, "Holy shit, this is actually really sugary!" Like, because I just didn't have a banana for a month, and I realized like how my body adapted to that over time. Um, so kind of resetting those expectations were great, and then obviously from the physical aspect, just having the confidence to actually take my shirt off in public is much better than it's ever been, and I think that's kind of a freeing moment for me. So.
So a couple of things I want to kind of touch on there that you mentioned, I think that are important, which is the recovery piece, which is everyone thinks you have to work out harder and harder and harder and more and more and more. And I was guilty of this myself. At one point during my fitness modeling career, if you can call it that, I was doing 50, 60. I mean, I'm talking sometimes on specific days, 70 sets with drop sets and supersets and all these crazy things that I was doing because I thought more and just working harder was going to be the key. But I forgot about that recovery piece. And it wasn't until I learned a bit more, got certified as a trainer, started working with clients, started understanding things a bit more and kind of really diving into it, that I recognized and understood the benefits of recovery. And if you're breaking your body down, which is what we're doing during a workout, tearing those muscles apart, micro tears in the muscles, you're pushing your body, you're pushing your central nervous system, all of these things, which are very good things. You want to do those things. But if you don't have the other side, which is the recovery piece, you don't come back better, you don't come back stronger, you don't come back leaner, you just keep breaking your body down. So there needs to be that balance. And sometimes working harder means, we're if you want to at least get results, means cutting back a little bit. But you could also work harder by adding in the nutritional component, which is something you mentioned there too. And our goal is not to restrict people, as funny as that sounds based on what you said. But what we want to do is help people develop a relationship that they want, with intention and purpose, with sugar and alcohol and dessert and pizza or whatever the things are that you like. And by kind of sometimes restricting yourself a little bit in the short term, it allows you to find that balance point, because we're big on balance and moderation. But it's so hard to go from like, and you weren't doing this, but it's just a great example. It's really hard to go from like 3 drinks to like 2 drinks or 1 drink. But it's a lot easier to go from 3 to like 0, or to go from eating all these kind of like carbohydrate foods or snacks to like no snacks. Like that's easier. Then you can reintroduce them and find your own balance point now with intention and purpose, which is what we like to help clients do. So it's short-term kind of restriction for ultimately long-term balance and moderation. So that's kind of the strategy and the philosophy that we have around these things. As you kind of went through this journey, because it certainly wasn't all rainbows and butterflies, what were maybe some of the obstacles that you faced, and how did you overcome them? If there was one, two, maybe three that stand out to you.
I think the hardest part for me is when I was traveling. I didn't travel much, but when I did travel, trying to find those protein sources that weren't complete junk. Um, and I think that's one of the things you told me in my weekly review is like pre-plan and actually bring it with you. And it's something that I didn't think about because I never had to do that before. So I think those kind of small adjustments definitely helped in the beginning as I moved on with the program. Um, and honestly, I think now I kind of tell people this is I'm eating actually more food than I've ever ate before in my life. Uh, I'm not, my calories are much higher than they used to be. So I actually find it hard sometimes to fit all that in towards the end here. But I know that it's obviously working, and I'm not feeling like I'm going to gain weight or fat because I'm eating this much. So I think that is the big difference also that I learned, that it's not necessarily just, the calorie number. It's what I'm eating and consuming in the process.
Yeah, and people can go online and Google this, of course, and there's certainly Instagram accounts that do a great job of this, where they kind of show this like eat this, not that, and they'll show 500 calories of fast food or kind of junk food, highly processed food that is very, very calorically dense but low in volume. I mean, the greatest example, this is coming from me, Sprinkles cupcake, which is 400 calories and obviously tons of sugar and fat, almost no protein. So you got 400 calories in this, size of my fist, which is a cupcake that you can inhale. And I typically eat them in about 30 seconds or so flat, maybe less. So you have 400 calories that you could eat like that. I mean, another great example, take 4 large Honeycrisp apples. Those will be probably around 400 calories. That's a lot more food that you can consume for the 400 calories. If you want to throw some vegetables in there and maybe lean chicken breast or other things, you can get a mountain of food for 400 calories. I mean, pretty incredible. So some of those types of things are things that most people don't really understand, and you don't know often until you start tracking, keeping a food journal or tracking your macros and start to dial things in. You go, oh wow, I didn't realize that those 2 handfuls of almonds or trail mix that I normally have was like 300 calories, until you start tracking it and kind of paying more attention. Then once you learn those things, you can make some adjustments. Now, instead of the sprinkles cupcake, you have a lot more food. And then maybe you sub that in for like a Yasso bar for 100 calories or something, or a legendary Pop Tart if you want to get really crazy for 180 calories, but also 20 grams of protein. And the difference is that when you're eating those types of foods, that they taste great, of course, you feel good, you have energy, you feel satiated and full, but not overly tired, and there's no crash. But also, it doesn't make you want to keep eating. Whereas if you eat one 400-calorie cupcake, you want another absolutely immediately afterwards. And it almost feels like you have a bottomless pit. But you eat an apple, very sweet, very tasty, delicious in many regards. But you're not like, oh my God, I need to eat 10 more apples right now. It's just not how it works. And that's a huge lesson that I think people can learn. So thank you for sharing that. And then the travel part, you're right. When people travel, it's not that you have to be perfect. It's just a little bit of planning and preparation goes a very long way. And the way I think of planning and preparation is most people say, well, I set a plan, Jackson, and it kind of goes crazy and it gets a little off track. And one of our clients messaged me just yesterday saying this very thing. And I'll always quote General Eisenhower, uh, incredible quote, which is, no battle was ever won according to plan, but no battle was ever won without a plan. So the point being is that planning and preparation are absolutely key. He planned and prepared along with many other people for D-Day, like to an insane level. I went to Normandy on a trip to Paris last year with my wife. It was absolutely fantastic. One of the most incredible historical sites, and the history and just the emotion and everything is just, it's really worth it if you ever get out to France or to Paris to go see. But they talked about the planning and the preparation, the months and months and months, even years of planning and preparation that they had, and all the things that they did, from Hollywood sets of tanks and all this stuff that they did. And of course, even on D-Day, even though it was a success, it didn't go exactly according to plan. A lot of things got off track a bit, but it was the planning and the preparation that went a long way to them ultimately being successful. And how that relates to me or you or anybody listening is that you spend 5 minutes going over maybe a menu before you go to dinner with some people, or before you're traveling and going to certain restaurants. That goes a long way, because then you're able to select things ahead of time that are going to be the better healthy options, and you have it already down. Or maybe you pack a bag and throw some zero sugar beef jerky and some venison sticks or turkey jerky, or maybe a couple of great protein bars. I like David protein bars right now, are one of my favorites. Little protein powder, some electrolytes, some things like this you just throw in your bag. And then you don't have to spend $20 on beef jerky and electrolytes when you're at the airport, and you already have them. You're prepared, and then you could execute like an absolute boss. And another quote that comes to mind, which is plan and prepare when you're at your best so you can execute flawlessly when you're at your worst. And that's another thing I try to think about with this. Were there any other maybe obstacles or challenges that you kind of experienced along the way?
I think the other thing I did very early in the beginning is I was trying to just get through the workouts. So I wasn't doing time under tension as well as I should have. And it's just because previously when I was using the tonal, like I just wanted to get through the reps and just didn't realize that portion of it. So I think as I was starting to slow that down and maybe using lighter reps to do it, I was noting a lot better outcomes when doing it.
Absolutely, which is just taking some intention to what you're doing when it comes to exercise. And so many people, even if you work out really hard, it's like just step back for a second and think, number one, what muscle am I actually trying to work? Am I trying to hit my chest or shoulders or triceps? And then number two, now that I know which muscle I'm trying to work, like think about that muscle a bit and think about what it feels like to activate it. So let's say you're going to do a bench press and you want to work your chest. Like, okay, chest, let me tap my chest. Let me feel what it feels like to activate my chest. Okay, cool. Now I got a little bit of a mind muscle connection. I understand, I have a little self awareness and body awareness now. Now let's jump into the set and let's move with control and controlling the weight, leveraging time under tension so that you can actually build the muscle and the strength of things that you want to do. And of course, your rep tempo is going to vary a bit, whether you want to build pure strength or if you want to build muscle, or if you're trying to do metabolic workouts versus hypertrophy style workouts, it's going to change a little bit. But for the most part, most of the research on these types of things suggests that as long as you're moving the weight with control, you're probably going to do very well. And control is usually roughly somewhere around 2 seconds on the eccentric, 1 second on the positive, and then you don't need a pause on either end. It's a pretty standard rep tempo for most people, which would be like a 1-0, 2-0 tempo, however you want to kind of add those numbers in. That's a pretty standard rep tempo. And then if you're thinking about time under tension and you're using tonal, here's a little hack or a trick, which is, okay, if I want to have control over the weight, and I'm thinking I'm going to use this rep tempo that Jackson recommends of 1-0, 2-0. Okay, great. How do I think about that in terms of time under tension on a per set basis? Well, if you're going to do a set of 10 for bench press, and you know that you want to have 2 seconds on the eccentric and 1 second on the positive, very simple math there. 10 times 2 is 20 plus another 10 is 30. You should have at least 30 seconds time under tension during that set. And if you do that, you're probably good. Give yourself a little margin of error, say somewhere between like 28 maybe on the low end to like 38 on the high end. And if you're in that range, you're good, but aim for 30, you're going to do really, really well because you'll have control over the weight, which is going to reduce your risk of injury. And it's going to help you really maximize the effectiveness of the set, both from a strength and a muscle building perspective. Now you're in business. So that's how we kind of teach clients to think about that. And I'm glad that was a lesson that you learned, which is like intention. Yes, what am I trying to do? And then doing it actually well so I can get the results. And that doesn't even dive into technique, which is a whole nother can of worms that we, probably could talk about for hours. As you kind of went through this journey, though, kind of a bit of a transition here, which is like from the obstacles to what were maybe some of the other kind of like benefits, lessons, or other things that you learned along the way? I know you mentioned also the confidence with taking your shirt off. That's fantastic. Were there any other things maybe that come to mind just to make sure we're covering all of our bases?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the biggest thing is that I could do it. Again, I really didn't have the expectations that I was going to look the way I do now. And that was never my intention either. But now that I do look this way, I feel great and obviously want to continue and build more muscle and figure out, how to micro target some of these other areas and just keep progressing and not kind of become stagnant, plateau, or regress to where I was before.
That's kind of interesting. So you mentioned, I didn't have this grand plan and like I didn't think that I would actually even possibly get to this point. So how was your mindset and how did that change and evolve from the beginning, which was, maybe you were a little hesitant, wasn't sure, you trusted me, but also at the same time, we're like, yeah, I don't know. this may or this may not work, and not having this whole grand plan. Because sometimes you hear the great Arnold Schwarzenegger, who obviously I love, he's the GOAT. Get to the choppa, the whole thing. I love Arnold. But Arnold always talks about having this big grand vision, and then you go after this vision. And you're kind of saying the opposite, is that you didn't have this grand vision. So I guess, how did your mindset evolve over time to get you to this point that you're able to lose 18 pounds, 9% body fat, 4 inches off your waist, and add over 100 points on your strength score?
Yeah, I think part of it is just tracking the progress. Because obviously Tonal gives you the strength score, and I was already kind of getting up there, but not seeing the physical progress I wanted. But using your app and forcing myself to take the pictures, because I would not have done that otherwise, is very helpful. Because in the 2 weeks time, I felt like, oh, I didn't make any progress. But then when I looked at the pictures, I was like, holy cow, I really did change a lot in those 2 weeks. And then every 2 weeks from there, and the measurements, the same thing. Obviously, clothes were fitting better, and so I knew I was making progress. And then really, it was also people just commenting that I hadn't seen in a while. So, last week I was on vacation and I hadn't seen two of my friends for, I don't know, 8, 9 months, and so they hadn't seen me in any portion of this progress. So they saw me from where I was before to now, and they couldn't believe the transformation. And so, like, that external validation was also amazing as well, more than just some of the internal.
That's incredible. So, what you're telling me is that maybe instead of, and I think people are different. So, some people probably will resonate with Arnold's view of like having this grand vision. But what you're telling me is that what you did, and what could be useful for some folks out there, is don't set maybe a grand vision. Obviously, I think you have to think maybe things are possible for you to succeed and to have good results. But instead, track your progress and your metrics, develop a system and habits, and if you do that and you're seeing consistent progress, wow, who knows where you can take it? I mean, I think that's how I got to this place in my body, in my business. When I started off, I wasn't at the gym. I wasn't like, I'm going to become this crazy fitness model. It was just like, I want to add muscle, get stronger, maybe get bigger, and try to get back on the baseball team, or maybe get in the starting lineup. And that kind of built on itself and kind of took off. When I started my fitness career, I was like, I mean, I just want to help people kind of figure out what to do and maybe start training people. And then it went to, well, maybe I could actually make a full time income with this. And wow, let's see if I could make $10,000 a month. And they're just sort of arbitrary goals that I kind of randomly would pull off the shelf or people would talk about. But it was more about just tracking progress. And then next thing you know, it's like, holy cow, now we have 90 plus clients, we have 100 plus success stories. But it didn't start with this grand vision of like, I'm going to get 100 of these interviews. I just started with one. And then from there, went to two, and then three. And then once you start to stockpile these things, you start to think, wow, maybe I could do 100. But in the beginning, it's just like one at a time and just moving through the process. It's like the Nick Saban quote of like, just focus on the process. If you do that, again, tracking your metrics as well and seeing where you were at, where you currently are, and kind of you seeing where you are on that in the journey, you can make incredible progress. And you don't need to have a huge grand vision or goals to do it. You can just dedicate to the process, build those habits and systems, and track your progress. And you could make a ton of progress. That's how you kind of get to the top of Mount Everest. Yeah, I mean, there's the goal and all, but you just do it one step at a time, one milestone at a time, one base camp at a time, and you get there. So it's a really interesting, I'd say, difference between maybe what some people think they need to do and what you actually did. And as you kind of got some of that external validation, did that open up the doors a bit of like, wow, maybe I can really take this to a new level?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where I'm at now. Obviously, is that I can continue my progress and build the more muscle that I want to see in the definition. Now that I know it's possible, and I'm not going to set myself up for failure. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. And the external validation stuff, it's not like the drive or the reason why we do it. As you kind of mentioned, health, longevity, you want all these things. But man, when you get those external validators, like, it's kind of fun and it's kind of nice. And it does kind of feed the ego a bit and kind of make you feel good. And then it's some of those moments that you're like, yeah, this was worth it. And it's funny because again, you don't do it for the external validation, but when you do get it, it does make it feel like, wow, this was worth it. Because it's almost this acknowledgement, if you will, this trophy or this medal that you get is like, yeah, I did do that. And I'll give you an example of this. Like when I started on Tonal, it was just like this fun thing that I wanted to do. And then I became a coach and it was like, well, you know, maybe this could be something more serious, or maybe this could be a big deal. Maybe this could be the next Peloton, if you will. And then, we started to kind of think like that. And I thought, well, maybe I can be like one of the best coaches on this. Maybe I could be one of the most popular. And then it slowly built, and I became I had six of the top eight programs at one point. And I remember there was this moment when I was doing an interview like this with Tony Horton, and we were doing one of these kind of weekly tonal talks, and we're talking and chatting. And Tony, I still have it recorded, by the way. He said, "If you don't know who this guy Jackson is, he's a superstar. He's a star, and he's like amazing." And he just went rambling on for 2 minutes about how awesome I was, and it was like, holy cow! Everything that I went through during that whole journey, quitting my job, everything. And this was the guy that I used to watch on TV and think, this guy is the best job in the world. And to get that acknowledgement, I didn't do it for the external validation that Tony Horton was one day going to tell me that I was a superstar and tell everybody else that on camera. But when he did it, wow, it made me feel pretty incredible. And it was just sort of a hallmark moment, if you will. It's a milestone moment of like, yes, I did it. I did what I wanted to do, and I think those things could be really really powerful. And in retrospect, as you can hear, like there's a lot of emotion attached to that, even though it wasn't the reason why I did it. So that's really really cool. Sean, I want to be respectful of your time, and I really appreciate you. So I want to quickly just acknowledge the journey, the effort, the discipline, the dedication, everything that you did, the commitment that you put into this. I mean, your next level, you were an absolutely incredible client. It was such a privilege and an honor, and really was my pleasure to work with you, man. I've loved working with you so far. I'm glad we're going to get a chance to continue, and I just can't thank you enough for not just doing this interview, but for everything you put into it. Again, I love working with people like yourself who, ambitious, want to take it to the next level, and just execute, 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 execute. And I'm just so grateful that our paths crossed and I got the opportunity to work with you. So thank you, my friend.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
So last question here is just like, was this journey worth it? Was all the hard work and everything that you put into it, was it worth it?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, kind of going off of something you said earlier, like the external validation, two of my colleagues at work separately said, "You inspired me to work on my fitness," which I think was actually more impressive to me than anything else. Like, I never thought that I would influence anyone to work out. I'm just not that person, or was not that person before now. So I think that is speaks volumes to not only the program, but like that confidence I got throughout the whole thing. And ultimately, again, I think from our first call where you said this is an investment, I truly believe that. I think I've invested in my health and my fitness and where I want to be and where I want to go. And now I know it's attainable and it's actually really easier to do than I thought it was. It's not insurmountable. And so, yeah, I think everything was worth it. And obviously, that's why I'm going to stay on for another couple phases to see if I can get further than I am now.
Wow, Sean, that really touched me, that story. It just hits me because to think about it, you go on this journey and you do all the hard work, put it all this in, and you get this obviously incredible result. And again, you're not doing it for these reasons, but I always say this, your journey is more important than you think, and people are going to notice. And then all of a sudden, you're inspiring other people. Now you're the inspiration. You're the kind of person that's leading by example. And people start, maybe they don't take it as much as far as you do, but even if that gets that person to lose 5, 10, 15 pounds, that could save somebody's life, which is incredible. And that could set their family up then for future success and maybe help their kids build better habits. And when you share that story, it touches me so, like, it just hits me so hard because I just think about obviously my upbringing, my past, my mom, and not being able to help her. And my whole dream, my goal, my vision is that I can help some other people kind of avoid those kinds of fates and futures. And it just makes me feel like this is working. And I kind of have this joke internally that I share with my team. I occasionally say it, publicly, but I feel like we're changing the world one six pack at a time. And it kind of, I mean, it's funny, but it's true. And you're a prime example of it. Is like you shoot to the moon, you get these crazy results. Other people see that and go, wow, if Sean can do it, maybe I can. And they start taking their health and their fitness more seriously. And who knows, that could add 1, 3, 5, maybe 10 years on somebody's life if they go down a path of improving their health and their fitness. So, Sean, that was incredible. It's a great way to end things. Thank you again, my friend. I really do appreciate it. Any final last little takeaways?
No, I mean, again, I'm just a very happy client. So,
Fantastic. Well, you heard Sean. Action is the difference. So take action today because that's the difference between dreaming and succeeding.